Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and this week we are diving into one of the most inventive sci-fi movies of the 90s, one of the most expensive European productions of all time, and one of the most subtle and understated performances in Chris Tucker's career.
What?
That's right, today we are diving deep into 1997's The Fifth Element, written and directed by Luc Besson and starring Bruce Willis, Milla Jovovich, Gary Oldman, Ian Holm, and Chris Tucker. We'll take a look at the movie's 20-plus year journey to get to the screen, how the movie came together, everything that makes it a classic, and its legacy almost 30 years later. Now, this isn't a movie I owned as a kid, nor is it one that I saw in theaters, but this was a movie that I would rent constantly and watch literally anytime it was playing on TV. I loved this movie so much that I once went up to the clerk at my local rental store and sincerely asked if they might have the first element, second element, etc., just on the off chance this movie was part of some long-running franchise that I just didn't know about. And shout out to the clerk that helped me, because he didn't mock me or laugh at me or anything. Instead, he pretended to consider it before telling me no, they just made the one movie. Also, as a kid, I was a big Bruce Willis fan. Between this movie, Die Hard, and weirdly Death Becomes Her, I was just a big fan. And that only amplified a few years later when I was finally allowed to see Pulp Fiction. But even now, The Fifth Element is a movie that just captures my attention from start to finish. And sure, it might be starting to show some signs of aging now, but it's just such a fun, bright, fast-moving train that it's hard to not just sit back and enjoy it. From the opening in Egypt, which really captured my imagination as a kid, to the bright and colorful view of the future, Gary Oldman's hair and performance, it all just still works for me from start to finish. But before I start going on and on about every little thing I love about The Fifth Element, let's go back in time and learn just a little bit more about how the movie came to be. And it all starts with writer-director Luc Besson, who started coming up with the idea for The Fifth Element when he was just 16 years old, taking particular inspiration from the French comic Valérian and Laureline, which was created by Pierre Christian and Jean-Claude Mézières, both of whom would actually be hired to work on this movie's production design. So Besson would continue working on the story for The Fifth Element over the years and refining it to the point that upon releasing his documentary Atlantis in 1991, he had over 400 pages written. And then after doing The Professional in 1994, he finally had enough cachet to get The Fifth Element made. And it would be French production company Gaumont Buena Vista that would end up greenlighting the movie with a $90 million budget, making it the most expensive European movie ever made up to that point, a record it would hold until the production of 2011's The Untouchables. As for casting of the movie, originally Besson had his eye on Mel Gibson for the lead, but he wasn't really interested / they couldn't really afford him. And then by pure happenstance, Besson happened to run into Bruce Willis while in New York, and Besson had actually soft pitched The Fifth Element to him 5 years earlier, so Willis was at least somewhat familiar with the concept. But Besson sent him the finished script, and then 2 hours later, Willis called saying he would do the movie, and he'd be happy to negotiate his salary to make it work. As for Ruby Rhod, originally Besson really wanted Prince, but Prince found the costumes way too outlandish, which is hilarious coming from a guy that used to dress like this. And for the record, I'm not making fun of Prince. I think he fully pulls it off. I'm just laughing at the irony of this guy saying that this is too outlandish. Gary Oldman has also said the only reason he agreed to do this movie is because he felt like he owed Besson a favor for helping him finance his own directorial debut. But in 2014, when he was asked if he actually liked the movie, he said, "Oh no, I can't bear it." Although in an interview with Josh Horowitz recently, he did say he's learning to appreciate the movie just a little bit more. And reportedly, over 3,000 women tried out for the role of Lilu before it was given to Milla Jovovich, and it really is hard to picture anyone else in this role. French fashion designer Jean-Paul Gaultier was also hired to help design and create the various costumes for the movie, and his team reportedly spent a full year coming up with over 8,000 drawn-out designs to share with the production team. And finally, in August of 1995, The Fifth Element would go into production with its $90 million budget, and filming would primarily take place in London, Paris, and Rome. And one thing that's crazy is even though Besson financed this with a studio, he somehow managed to get all of the financiers banned from set, and he didn't have to show them any footage for approval. As far as behind-the-scenes stories go, Jovovich and Besson both became fluent in the divine language that Lilu speaks while filming, and initially the production decided they should just dye Jovovich's hair the orange that we see in the movie. However, after a few weeks of dyeing it every single day, her hair started to be clearly damaged and began began breaking. So they instead had to create an orange wig for her to wear, and I honestly can't tell which shots are the wig versus which shots are her real hair. Filming would wrap in November of 1996, and the movie would then go into post-production, and though it required a lot of effects work, it does seem like everything went pretty smoothly, because on May 7th, 1997, The Fifth Element premiered at the Cannes Film Festival as the festival's opening movie. Guests were given a Fifth Element branded swatch to use as their ticket, and I gotta say, these things do look pretty cool. As for the US side of things, The Fifth Element would hit theaters on May 9th, 1997, and on its opening weekend, it would place first at the box office, making $17 million against its $90 million budget. And The Fifth Element would actually end its theatrical run with a worldwide total of $263.9 million, making it an objective hit for everyone involved. Although, strangely enough, even though this was a hit and performed well with audiences, and Besson said he had plans for a trilogy, this would end up being the only Fifth Element movie we would end up getting. Apologies for the interruption, but I wanted to just jump in and let you know that today's video is brought to you by the members of my Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. Truly, you guys help me keep the lights on here at Born to Rant. Members get credited at the end of every video, early access to videos, access to exclusive monthly polls, and starting this month, I will be doing one members-only video per month. And for our inaugural episode, I'll be taking a look at Joe Dante's The Burbs, which will be coming out later this month. So if that's something you're interested in, there's a link in the description below to join the Patreon, or a button beneath the video to become a channel member. And with all of that out of the way, I think it's time for us to grab our multipass and dive deep into the world of The Fifth Element.
Sir, are you classified as human?
Negative. I am a meat popsicle.
Now, I really love the opening sequence of this movie and the way it sets up the lore of the entire story. Plus these little moments here like Aziz, light! And the way that Luke Perry is keeping count of how many times it's yelled is such a great little touch. And anyway, we're quickly introduced to the secret order assigned to protect the stones, the Mondoshawians, and we understand that the stones are part of a weapon used to defeat an ancient evil that tries to destroy everything once every 5,000 years. We also learn that the stones are no longer safe on Earth, and the Mondoshawians take the stones away. Cut to 300 years later, and we get a quick scene with the president, played by the one and only Tiny Lister, and our introduction to Ian Holm as Vito Cornelius. Great name, by the way. And this really serves to show us that the evil entity really exists and is more powerful than we could possibly imagine, and it's heading straight for Earth. Then we cut to New York, and we get our first look at the bright world of New York in the 23rd century. And I really want to pause here and talk about the production design, art direction, and miniatures that make up our future New York City. Like Besson has said in interviews that the reason this movie is so bright is because he was tired of seeing dark and drab looking sci-fi movies set in the future. And everything about the design of the future here just makes it feel so real and lived in, like you could reach out and touch absolutely everything in the frame. So again, shout out to production designer Dan Weil and the work of Jean-Mobius Giraud and Jean-Claude Mézières, who both really influenced the look of this world and helped design it. And then all of the model and miniature makers and digital effects artists, because I really don't think we've seen a vision of the future that looks like this before or since this movie came out. And anyway, this is where we're introduced to Bruce Willis as Corbin Dallas, and his introduction does a fantastic job of setting up his character. Like, his apartment alone tells us so much about him. It's simple and cramped, and one of the details that I love the most is his cigarette dispenser and the way it loudly announces, "To quit is my goal," before spitting out a couple cigarettes with the largest filters I've ever seen in my life. His phone call with his old military buddy, Finger, also really helps set up the character. We know he's ex-military, we know he's divorced, miserable, and driving a cab, but his license is also incredibly close to being fully revoked. Also, I couldn't find out for sure who voices Finger, but the popular theory seems to be Vin Diesel, and I don't know, I can kind of hear it.
Just found a picture of you.
How do I look?
Like shit.
Must be an old picture.
And I mean, we cannot move on from the apartment without talking about the hilarious robbery attempt. This is one of those moments that I immediately think about when this movie gets brought up. I love that Willis can't help but laugh at the guy's ridiculous hat and the dude senselessly dancing after getting his gun taken away. We then cut away to see Lilu's hand being brought in so these futuristic scientists can essentially 3D print a new version of her, which, sure, many of the VFX here haven't aged the best, but I think it's still a really cool concept, and it's still really really worked for me. And I like that when we're finally introduced to Lilu as she wakes up, she's very scared and confused, but then she remembers that she's a perfect weapon, takes out this general, and escapes. This poor guy, he gets his ass kicked so many times, he even gets frozen later on. So shout out to the late great Brian James. Once Lilu is awake, this movie quickly swings into gear. We get the fantastic chase sequence with her falling into Corbin's cab, and I love the hilarious details of the bulky cop uniforms and the fact that they're all like fat guys eating McDonald's throughout the entire movie. Plus the chase scene that ensues is also really fun action filmmaking, and I love the practicality of the taxi cab itself. Then it's time to meet the villains of the movie, Gary Oldman as Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, another incredible name by the way. We also meet the Mangalore, who are kind of the stupid villains for lack of a better term. And fun fact, the Mangalore masks were later recycled for the Nemodians in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And I love this sequence so much. Like, Oldman might not love this performance, but it's so bonkers and fun. Pretty much from the first moment he begins speaking and his running through how the gun works to the sheer disappointment and heartbreak on his face when he opens the case and realizes there are no stones in it. And the way the movie cuts back to Lilu laughing at this is just great. And then of course the sequence ends with Zorg yelling,
"Zero stones, zero crates!"
and then being a cool guy that doesn't look at explosions.
Yeah, cool guys don't look at explosions.
And I do have to say, one thing I really bumped into when rewatching this time was the character of Zorg and where he fits into the story. Like, I understand that he's working for an unseen character named Mr. Shadow, and the scene where they're talking on the phone and blood starts flowing down Zorg's face is genuinely still so unnerving even today. But anyway, I just don't quite understand who Mr. Shadow is, and maybe that's something that would have been explored in the sequels, who's to say. But even Mr. Shadow aside, I really don't understand Zorg's logic. Like, we get the great conversation between him and Cornelius, where he talks about order and chaos and blah blah blah, but like, wouldn't this evil entity just wipe everything out? So how is this dude going to become even more rich off of the chaos if there's nothing left to profit off of? Also, his scene with Cornelius is so great. I love how overly confident Zorg is right up until the moment he starts choking, and I do love the overall storytelling on display here. Zorg is so confident in his actions, yet all of his button mashing and gadgets can't save him from a simple cherry pit. And I think the way the various storylines come together to bring us into the second half of the movie is genuinely well done. Everyone is after the missing stones, and we've essentially got 4 separate groups going after them. First, we've got the president and the military who plan to bring in an inside man to infiltrate a trip to the luxurious Floston paradise and recover the stones. And that inside man is, of course, Corbin Dallas. And who should overhear this plan but Zorg's right-hand man, played by British rapper Tricky? And the little detail of him using a mic'd up cockroach to eavesdrop on this plan is actually hilarious. Then we've got Cornelius, David, and Lilu, who plan to take Corbin's multipass and go on the trip instead and take the stones. And finally, we've got the Mangalore, who really just want to get the stones to get revenge on Zorg for trying to blow them up. And man, after the contest plot point is announced, everything in this movie moves so incredibly fast. First, the general and his team come to brief Corbin, who then hides them in the freezer when Cornelius and Lilu show up, and Corbin has to hide them as well because the police show up looking for him on Zorg's orders, of course. And I really don't understand how the cops end up arresting the wrong guy. Like, it doesn't really make much sense to me at all. Did the cops not look up his apartment number before showing up or what? So the sequence ends with the cops arresting the wrong guy, Cornelius knocking out Corbin and stealing his ticket, and Corbin saying,
Take the mission.
And then the airport sequence is even more insane, with David panicking while trying to check in before Corbin shows up and just kind of bullies David out of the way and gets on the plane. And then the Mangalore showing up and blowing it immediately. There's also the insanity of the burning off of the parasites and Cornelius hiding in the plane's cargo hold. But obviously, once we're on the plane, we're introduced to the real star of the movie, Chris Tucker as Ruby Rhod. And I mean, what can be said about this performance? It's the biggest, loudest thing that Tucker has ever done in a career that he realistically built off of being both big and loud.
Right on, and and he's got something to say.
And once we're too flossed in paradise, the movie again just keeps moving incredibly fast. We're introduced to the diva and told that the stones will be handed over after the performance. And okay, let's talk about the diva for a minute. First of all, she was played by Milla Jovovich, who was married to Besson at the time of filming, but Besson would actually end up leaving her for Jovovich shortly after filming. But anyway, everything about the diva is incredible. The costume is so unique and cool, and then My Win is absolutely nailing the performance aspect, while Inva Mula is providing the singing voice. And fun fact about the song, it's actually physically impossible to perform because the human voice can't switch notes as quickly as the song requires. So all of the lines of the song were actually recorded separately and individually. And the diva performance really kicks off the third act of the movie. We get our big action sequence with Lilu taking out the Mangalore and Corbin and Ruby trying to stay alive in the opera house. I mean, the whole sequence just rocks. There's so many fun moments, like this guy getting his head stuck in the balcony, and the way Tucker tries pushing his head down legitimately cracks me up. I also think it's kind of weird that Zorg dies here. It's just kind of a weird story choice in my opinion. But luckily Oldman is so great in the role, you kind of don't care because you're just happy to see him on screen. So then we're off to Egypt to save the world, and I love the sheer panic on everyone's face when they get inside the temple and realize they have absolutely no idea what the hell they're supposed to do. And then we get all these great little clips of people trying various things to open the stones, and then obviously the answer is that each stone aligns with an element, and the lighting of the match here still makes me hold my breath when I watch this movie even now. So the movie ends with the world being saved and Corbin and Lilu finally getting some alone time.
It's the best show I ever did.
So almost 30 years later, what is the legacy of The Fifth Element? Well, it's kind of complicated. As a sci-fi action and 90s movie, it's absolutely beloved and remembered fondly, from the performances to the set pieces and the world it builds. I think this is an undeniable classic in the world of sci-fi movies. But there is another aspect, and that's the Luc Besson factor. I don't really want to get into the whole thing, but if you start digging into Besson's life and history with women, some really disturbing trends start to emerge, and for me personally, it really made several of the aspects of this movie feel a little less fun on this watch through. But that stuff aside, originally Besson had wanted this to be a trilogy like the original Star Wars trilogy, but even though this was a massive hit, we never got another Fifth Element movie, although Besson would finally get the chance to direct an adaptation of his beloved Valérian comic, which would come out in 2017 and would be a massive disappointment at the box office. Alejandro Jodorowsky and Mobius also sued Besson after The Fifth Element was released, claiming that it plagiarized several elements of their comic, The Inkle. However, the lawsuit was pretty quickly tossed out because the elements taken were very small, and Besson also, hired Mobius to work on the movie. But let me know in the comments, where do you land on The Fifth Element? Do you love it as much as I do? What would you have wanted to see in a sequel? If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. And again, an extra special thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. Patrons and channel members, you all truly keep the lights on over here at Born to Rant, and I could not do it without you. Please don't forget that Born to Rant is a completely independent channel. Your support by either liking or subscribing would mean the world. Plus, if it means anything to you, I use absolutely no AI in the making of my videos. And that's going to do it for Born to Rant this week. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.